Good afternoon, students. This is Mr. Messina broadcasting out of the wonderful St. Charles High School. Today I'm going to be talking to you about biology, specifically organelles, the structural organelles inside cells. Now, Mr. Russell in the previous video talked to you about what a prokaryote was and a eukaryote, and he probably mentioned cell organelles, but I don't know if he went into a whole lot of detail. So I'm going to give you a brief crash course, and then we'll talk about the structural organelles. So the way human beings are really many living creatures, such as dogs, cats, humans, as I said before, elephants, what have you, all these things have different things called organelles inside them. These organelles are specialty tissues that do very special things in order to keep their organism alive. Cells being living organisms, a lot of them have their own special organelles that do special things in order to make sure that cell is going. So mitochondria produce energy in animal cells, actually also in plant cells. You may have cell walls that serve as barriers. You may have the nucleus, which does other stuff. All these different organelles we're going to talk about in the next few videos. Mr. Russell and I have broken up all the organelles into a few categories to help you guys remember. So the first category we're going to talk about are structural organelles. Of the structural organelles, the first one is the cell membrane. The cell membrane is a lipid barrier that actually prevents things from escaping the cell, also prevents things from going inside the cell. Now I said it's a lipid barrier, which means it's kind of like an oil barrier because lipids are in fact oils. If you look at the little image that you can see below, you can see that the outside and the inside of the cell are clearly separated by this really weird chain. It's called a bilayer because it actually is two separate layers that has been glued together. Like I said before, the cell membrane keeps organelles, proteins, different chemicals that we need inside of our cells so they don't go floating away to talk to other cells or other organisms, things like that. Now I also mentioned the cell membrane keeps things out. These things can be viruses, they can be other bacteria, but it also can be like things like toxins and things like that from entering into and destroying the inside of the cell. Now, as good of a barrier as the cell membrane is, some things do need to get across. And those things can be sugars for food, it can be water, it can be all kinds of different ions. We'll talk about how those things actually cross our cell membrane, because the cell membrane actually allows some of those things to cross. But we'll talk about that in a later video. So the first structural organelle is the cell membrane. The second one is the cytoskeleton. And the cytoskeleton provides a lot of support for the cell. If you think of a cell as a house, the cytoskeleton is actually the wood beams that support the house and actually prevent it from collapsing in on itself. You can see in this little picture over here, someone has actually dyed all the different filaments that make up the cytoskeleton, all kinds of different colors, and you can see how many and how dense that they are. They just sprawl all across the cell from one side of the membrane to the other side of the cell, to touch the other side of the membrane. Now they're made of three different types of filaments. They're made of microfilaments, microtubules, as well as intermediate filaments. Microtubules are the biggest and sturdiest. The microfilaments are the smallest and longest, and the intermediates are exactly that, just kind of somewhere in between. So we have the cell membrane, which keeps things out. We have the cytoskeleton, which actually reinforces and keeps the cell from collapsing in on itself. The last thing that we have that's a structural organelle is the cytoplasm. Now the cytoplasm, it's really unusual in the fact that it's not really solid, it's not really liquid, it's like a jelly, or if you've ever seen molasses. That's a good way to think of the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm provides support for the organelles. It also allows things to move inside of the cell. So if you need to get sugar from the cell membrane over to a mitochondria, or if you need to transport an RNA sequence from the cell nucleus all the way to the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, once again, guys, we'll talk about all these different things. If you want to move anything from point A to point B inside of a cell, you definitely have to go through the cytoplasm. So you can think of the cytoplasm almost like an ocean, and all the organelles are different little islands. So if you want to move from point A to point B, you just sail across the cytoplasm. That's mostly what it's used for. So we talked about the cell membrane, and how it keeps things out and keeps things in. We talked about the cytoskeleton and how it provides support for the cell. And we also talked about the cytoplasm, which of course lets nutrients and a few other things travel inside the cell. Tune in next time and we're going to talk about synthesis organelles, which are organelles that actually make stuff. Have a classy Thursday. I'm Mr. Messina signing off.